She sent the text at 11:37 on a Saturday night. I know the exact time because I still have the screenshot saved in a folder labeled Documentation on my laptop. The message read, FYI, just got engaged to Derek in Cabo. Figured you should hear it from me. Don't wait up. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter, poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, and sat at the table for about 4 minutes. Then I picked the phone back up and typed one word. Congratulations. I hit send. I finished the bourbon, and then I opened my laptop and started making calls. My name is not important. What is important is that I am 51 years old. I spent 22 years building a commercial real estate consulting firm from a spare bedroom in a rented apartment, and I was married for 14 of those years to a woman I will call my wife, because that is what she was, legally, until the courts said otherwise. Her name was Renee. I want to be honest with you about who Renee was when I married her, because it matters for everything that comes later. She was smart, she was funny, in a dry, quiet way that caught you off guard. She had grown up with very little, same as me, and that shared history felt like a foundation we were building on together. When we got married in a small ceremony outside Nashville, North Carolina, I genuinely believed we were the kind of people who would grow old being proud of each other. For the first 8 years, I think we were. Then the firm started doing well. Not just comfortable well, genuinely well. We moved from Charlotte to a larger house outside Nashville. We traveled. My wife stopped working her marketing job because she did not need to, and because she said she wanted to focus on building something of her own. I supported that fully. I told her I would back whatever she wanted to do. What she wanted to do, it turned out, was open an interior design boutique with a man named Derek Calloway. I met Derek 3 years before that text message arrived. He came to our house for dinner twice. He was polished, about 45, recently divorced, and he talked about the design business with a confidence I found slightly over-rehearsed, but harmless. My wife lit up around him in a way I noticed, but chose to interpret generously. Business partners get excited talking about their shared project. That is normal. I told myself it was normal. I told myself that for 2.5 years. There was a Tuesday in March, about 18 months before the Cabo text, when I came home earlier than expected from a site visit in Memphis. The house was not empty the way I expected it to be. My wife's car was in the driveway. Derek's car was parked one house down on the street, something I registered but did not immediately process. I walked in through the garage. I heard voices upstairs. I want to tell you I confronted them that afternoon. I want to tell you I handled it with fire and noise, but I did not. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for about 30 seconds, and then I walked back out to the garage, sat in my car, and drove to a parking lot 2 miles away. I sat in that parking lot for a long time. When I drove back, Derek's car was gone. My wife was downstairs in the kitchen cooking. She did not know I had been there. She asked about my day, and I said, Memphis went fine. We ate dinner. I watched the news. She went to bed early. I sat in the dark living room until 1 in the morning. And I made a decision. I was not going to blow this up on impulse. I was not going to give anyone the opportunity to reframe what was happening, to make me look unstable, to muddy the water around assets we had spent 14 years accumulating together. I was going to be patient. I was going to document everything, and I was going to call my attorney before I said a single word to my wife. I called him the next morning. His name is Wallace. He had done our estate planning 3 years earlier, and I trusted him completely. I did not tell him everything on that first call. I told him enough. He referred me to a colleague who specialized in family law and high-asset divorce. I had a consultation within the week. The first thing she asked me was whether we had a prenuptial agreement. We did. My wife had signed it before our wedding without much pushback, because at the time neither of us had significant assets, and it had felt more theoretical than real. The agreement was clear about what happened to assets accumulated through my firm. It was also clear about what happened in the event of documented infidelity. My attorney confirmed the language was solid. Then she said something I have thought about many times since. She said, "Do not change your behavior. Do not tip your hand. Keep living normally and let me handle the preparation. Your job is to gather information quietly." So that is what I did. Over the next 14 months, I learned patience I did not know I had. I hired a private investigator. I want to say that plainly, because I know some people find it distasteful. I did not hire him out of cruelty or obsession. I hired him because I needed documentation that would hold up if challenged, and because I was not willing to trust my own emotionally compromised observation. He was professional, thorough, and discreet. Over 4 months, he gave me enough. I also paid close attention to the finances of the design boutique. My wife and I had opened a joint business account to capitalize her venture at the start, $180,000 of my money. I had access to those records. What I found, with the help of a forensic accountant my attorney recommended, was a pattern of transfers that told a very specific story about where the money had actually been going. Not fraud in the screaming obvious sense, more like a slow, deliberate draining through vendor payments and consulting fees that circled back to accounts connected to Derek. My wife had not stolen from me the way a thief steals. She had done it the way someone does when they have convinced themselves they deserve what they are taking. I printed every relevant document. I organized them by category in a set of manila folders that I kept in a locked fireproof box in my home office. I labeled the box with a piece of masking tape that said Tax Files 2021. Nobody looks in a box that says Tax Files 2021. By the time she texted me from Cabo, I had been ready for 4 months. I should tell you about the engagement. What my wife had not known, and what I had known for 6 weeks by that point, was that my attorney had already filed the initial paperwork for divorce. We had been waiting on timing related to the asset documentation. The filing had not yet been formally served because we were coordinating it deliberately. So when her text arrived announcing an engagement to Derek Calloway, what she did not understand was that she was engaged to a man while legally married to me, and that I had the divorce papers already prepared, and that the moment she sent that message, she handed me something extremely useful. A documented, time-stamped, written record of her announcing a romantic commitment to another man, while our marriage was still legally intact. My attorney called it a gift. I called it Tuesday. I sent the congratulations text. I set down the phone, and then I called Wallace. He answered on the second ring. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All right, let's move the timeline up." The next morning, I changed the access codes to the house. I contacted our bank and separated the accounts we were permitted to separate under the existing agreements. I documented every action I took with timestamps. I was not vindictive. I did not cancel credit cards she needed for basic expenses, because my attorney advised me against anything that could be painted as financial abuse. I was clean and precise. I sent an email to my wife that morning. Not angry. Factual. I told her I was aware of her engagement. I told her she would be receiving formal divorce papers and should contact her own attorney. I told her I wished her well, and that I hoped we could handle the process with dignity. I sent the email at 7:43 a.m. By 9:15 a.m., she had called me 4 times out of our 2. I did not answer. By 11:00 a.m., she had sent 14 text messages ranging from disbelief to accusation to what I can only describe as theatrical grief. By 2 p.m., she had apparently called Derek. By 4 by 2 m, she had called me. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was calm on the surface and furious underneath. Something about needing to have a conversation like adults. I saved the voicemail in the documentation folder. She flew back from Cabo 2 days later. I was not at the house when she arrived. I made arrangements to stay with a colleague in Brentwood for the week, which my attorney had advised. My wife arrived to find the house locked, her key no longer working, and a notice on the door from my attorney's office with a phone number to call. I heard later from a mutual friend, one of the few who stayed neutral, that she sat in her car in the driveway for over an hour. I do not say this with satisfaction. I say it because it is what happened. She retained an attorney within the week. Her attorney sent a letter arguing that the prenuptial agreement should be considered invalid due to, among other things, alleged coercion and claimed misrepresentation at the time of signing. This is not an uncommon tactic. My attorney was unsurprised. We had anticipated it. What her attorney did not know, and what became clear during the discovery process, was the extent of the documentation I had assembled. The private investigator's records, the financial audit, the text message from Cabo, the voicemail from Derek, 14 months of quiet, careful work organized in manila folders in a fireproof box labeled Tax Files 2021. When my attorney presented the initial discovery package to her attorney, there was a pause in communications that lasted about a week. Then her side requested mediation. I want to talk about the business account because this is the part that I think matters most beyond the personal story. The $180,000 I had put in to capitalize the design boutique was classified under our prenuptial agreement as an investment subject to specific terms. My forensic accountant had shaded $94,000 of it through a chain of transactions that constituted what the lawyers describe as improper diversion, meaning it had left the business account and ended up benefiting Derek personally and professionally, through arrangements my wife had authorized without my knowledge, or legal right to do so unilaterally. This was not just a divorce issue. This was potentially a civil fraud issue. My attorney made sure her attorney understood that clearly. The conversation about mediation moved quickly after that. Mediation happened on a Wednesday in October, about 5 months after she sent that text from Cabo. I sat on one side of a long table in a conference room in downtown Nashville. My wife sat on the other side. Derek was not present. He was by then retaining his own separate counsel regarding the financial matter. I had not seen my wife in person since before she left for Cabo. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had spent 5 months learning that the stories she had been telling herself did not match the documents in front of her attorneys. I felt something sitting across from her, but I want to be careful about what I say it was. It was not triumph. It was not contempt. It was something closer to grief for the version of us that had existed in the first 8 years. The two people who had driven a rented truck from an apartment in Charlotte with a couch that didn't fit through the door and laughed about it for an hour on the sidewalk. That version of us was not in a room on that Wednesday in October. Just two people and their attorneys and a very long table. The settlement took most of the day. The prenuptial agreement held. The investment recovery claim on the $94,000 was settled for $81,000 returned to me as part of the overall agreement. The firm, its assets, and its future earnings were clearly protected under the original prenup language. My wife received the equity in a vacation property we had purchased jointly 5 years earlier, which was the largest concession on my side and one my attorney had advised was worth making to avoid prolonged litigation. At no point during the mediation did either of us raise our voices. When it was over, we signed what we needed to sign. My attorney shook my hand in the elevator. She said, "You handled this better than most people handle a Tuesday afternoon." I got in my car and drove to a diner I had been going to since I moved to Nashville. I sat at the counter. I ordered coffee and scrambled eggs and toast. The woman behind the counter, I have seen her there for years, I think her name is Carol, asked if I was all right. I told her I'd had a long few months, but I was getting my feet under me. She refilled my coffee without being asked. That felt like enough. There are things I want to say to anyone listening who might be somewhere inside a story that feels like mine. The first is this: patience is not weakness. I know how it feels to want to blow everything up in the moment, to make noise, to make the other person see what they have done, to force the situation into the open right now. I understand that impulse. I felt it standing at the bottom of my staircase on that Tuesday in March. I chose not to follow it, and that choice protected me in ways I am still grateful for. The second is, document everything. Not obsessively, not from a place of paranoia, but because reality requires evidence, and evidence requires effort. Everything I had when I walked into that mediation room existed because someone made the deliberate choice to write it down, photograph it, file it, and save it. Facts do not defend themselves. You have to do that work. The third is something I did not expect to feel. I do not hate my wife. I am not sure I even should. She made choices that were dishonest and harmful. She also made those choices inside a life that we had built together, which means I am not entirely absent from the story of how we got there. That is not self-blame. That is just honest accounting. The version of her that I married in a backyard ceremony outside Nashville, with 23 guests and a cake that was slightly too sweet. I still believe that person was real. I believe she wanted the same things I did in the beginning. I believe life moved and we moved differently. And somewhere in that distance, a different set of choices started to seem possible to her. I do not excuse what she did, but I also do not need to make her into a monster to understand it. Derek and my wife did not marry. I learned this not through drama, but through the quiet, unremarkable way that information eventually surfaces. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it in passing about 8 months after the mediation. There was no elaborate explanation. It simply did not happen. I did not feel what I expected to feel when I heard that. I think what I felt was mostly tired. I am writing this, or rather telling this, from a house outside Nashville that feels the right size for one person for the first time. The firm is doing well. I've been spending Sunday mornings at a farmer's market about a mile away, which is something I never would have made time for before. Last month I helped a client close on a mixed-use development in Chattanooga that we had been working on for 3 years, and I sat in the parking lot after the signing and let myself feel genuinely proud in a way I had not felt in a long time. My attorney sends me a Christmas card every year now. I send one back. I still have the folder labeled documentation on my laptop. I have not opened it in 6 months. One day I will delete it when it feels less like history I need to keep and more like weight I no longer need to carry. I do not know exactly when that will be, but I can feel it coming.